The Plaza Hotel's presidential suite on the 58th floor commanded a breathtaking view of Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the autumn splendor of New York City like a living painting. For Sheikh Tahnoon al-Rashid, this vista should have represented the culmination of a dream, his first visit to America, a celebration of 15 years of marriage, and an adventure with his brilliant 8-year-old son, Zayan. Instead, as he paced the Italian marble floors at 3 in the morning, it felt like a gilded prison where his world was collapsing one devastating moment at a time. "Baba, my stomach hurts," Zayan whimpered from the king-sized bed, his small body curled into a tight ball beneath Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. His face, normally bright with the curiosity that marked him as his father's son, was pale and drawn with an illness that had struck with terrifying suddenness. Tahnoon knelt beside the bed, pressing his palm against his son's burning forehead. The fever had spiked dramatically in the past hour, and Zayan's skin felt like touching heated stone. "I know, Habibi, Baba is going to take care of you." But even as he spoke the reassuring words in Arabic, panic clawed at his throat. They were strangers in a foreign country, and his wife, the woman who should have been helping him navigate this crisis, had vanished 3 hours ago with nothing but a cruel note left on the bathroom mirror. "I can't pretend to be happy anymore. Don't look for me." The hotel's restaurant had served them an elaborate welcome dinner earlier that evening, oysters, exotic seafood, delicacies that Amina had insisted they try, despite Tahnoon's preference for simpler fare. Now, Zayan was paying the price for his mother's adventurous palate, and she was nowhere to be found when their son needed her most. "Baba," Zayan's voice was barely a whisper, "I think I'm going to be sick again." Tahnoon helped his son to the bathroom, his heart breaking as the little boy's body was racked with violent retching. Nothing came up, there was nothing left, but the dry heaves seemed to tear through Zayan like internal earthquakes. When the spasms finally stopped, Zayan collapsed against his father, boneless with exhaustion. "We need to get you to a doctor," Tahnoon said in Arabic, lifting his son with the careful tenderness of someone handling the most precious thing in existence. He reached for the hotel phone with trembling fingers, but when the concierge answered, the rapid English might as well have been ancient Sanskrit. Tahnoon's command of languages, fluent Arabic, French, and Hindi, meant nothing in this moment when his son's life might depend on communication he couldn't provide. "Help," he managed in heavily accented English. "My son, sick. Very sick." "Sir, I'm having trouble understanding you," the concierge replied with professional patience. "Could you speak more slowly?" Frustration and terror crashed over Tahnoon like twin tsunamis. He tried again, forcing himself to pronounce each English word carefully, but his accent was too thick, his vocabulary too limited. The concierge seemed to be trying to help, but the language barrier was an insurmountable wall between Zayan and the medical care he desperately needed. In desperation, Tahnoon hung up and dialed 911, the only American number he'd memorized. When the operator answered, he tried to explain the emergency, but she couldn't understand his location, couldn't comprehend the severity of Zayan's condition through his broken English and growing panic. "Sir, you need to calm down and speak clearly," the operator said. "What is your emergency?" "My son!" Tahnoon shouted in Arabic, forgetting that she couldn't understand. "My son is dying and I can't make anyone understand." He hung up in frustration and lifted Zayan, who had begun to convulse again. The little boy's eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and his body went rigid in his father's arms. This was beyond food poisoning. This was life-threatening dehydration, possibly toxic shock from whatever contaminated seafood he'd consumed. Tahnoon burst from the presidential suite into the hallway, still in his sleeping clothes, carrying his convulsing son while shouting for help in Arabic. "Musa'ada! Somebody help us! My son is dying!" The few hotel guests he encountered in the corridor stared at him with alarm and confusion, clearly unable to understand his desperate pleas. One elderly woman pressed herself against the wall as if he were dangerous rather than desperate. A businessman in a robe hurried past without making eye contact. "Please!" Tarnoon cried, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "Somebody who speaks Arabic! Anybody!" He reached the elevator banks and frantically pressed the call button, Zayan limp in his arms now, his breathing shallow and irregular. The elevator seemed to take forever, and when it finally arrived, Tarnoon stumbled inside, pressing buttons blindly as tears of helplessness streamed down his face. The elevator stopped at the 42nd floor, and the doors opened to reveal a figure that seemed like a vision sent from heaven itself. Oprah Winfrey had been restocking the housekeeping cart for the graveyard shift when she heard the commotion from the elevator bank. At 41, she'd worked at the plaza for 3 years, long enough to recognize the difference between entitled guest tantrums and genuine emergencies. But when the elevator doors opened to reveal a desperate father holding a critically ill child, her heart immediately understood the crisis even before her mind processed the Arabic words he was speaking. "Musa'ada, help me! Please, someone who understands!" Oprah had learned Arabic during her 5 years working as a nanny for the Al Mahmoud family in their Dubai estate. The language had become a bridge to a world she'd fallen in love with, a culture of poetry and hospitality, of deep family bonds and spiritual beauty. She'd never expected those skills to matter in a Manhattan hotel corridor, but here was a man speaking the language of her heart while holding a child who was clearly dying. "Ana fam," she said clearly in Arabic, stepping toward them. "I understand. What's wrong with your son?" Tarnoon's head snapped up, his dark eyes wide with shock and desperate hope. In that moment, seeing this beautiful black woman speaking perfect Arabic, he thought perhaps Allah had sent him an angel disguised as a hotel employee. "Food poisoning," he gasped in Arabic, his words tumbling over each other with relief at finally being understood. "From the restaurant downstairs. He's been vomiting for hours, and now he's having seizures. I can't make anyone understand. I don't speak English well enough, and my wife is gone." Oprah took immediate charge with the calm efficiency of someone who'd navigated medical emergencies in multiple languages. "Come with me," she said, guiding them toward the service elevator. "I'm calling an ambulance, and I'll translate everything for the paramedics." As they descended toward the lobby, Oprah spoke rapidly into her phone, first with hotel security to meet them at the service entrance, then with 911 to report a pediatric medical emergency with specific symptoms and location details that Tarnoon could never have communicated himself. "The ambulance will be here in 4 minutes, she told him in Arabic. "What's your son's name?" "Zayan al-Rashid." "And you're his father?" "Sheikh Tarnoon al-Rashid." Even in crisis, the title carried weight, indicating his status and the resources at his disposal. "Thank you. I don't even know your name, but you're saving my son's life." "Oprah," she replied simply. "And Habibi, your son is going to be fine. We're going to take good care of him." The endearment, Habibi, spoken with such natural warmth, hit Tarnoon like a physical blow. This stranger was calling his dying son, "my dear," with the tenderness of family, and in that moment he knew that whatever happened next, his life had been forever changed by the woman who had appeared when he needed a miracle most. As the ambulance sirens grew louder in the distance, Oprah kept one hand on Zayan's forehead, checking his temperature and pulse with practiced competence, while speaking softly to him in Arabic, words of comfort that seemed to ease his suffering even in unconsciousness. And Tarnoon realized that he had found something in New York that he'd never expected to discover, a woman who spoke the language of his heart. Chapter 2. Hands That Heal. Sometimes salvation comes not from doctors or medicine, but from gentle hands that know exactly how to hold a shattered heart together. The emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos that marked New York's premier medical facilities, a symphony of beeping monitors, urgent conversations, and the steady rhythm of lives being saved one crisis at a time. For Oprah, who had accompanied Tarnoon and Zayan in the ambulance despite having no official reason to be there, the familiar medical atmosphere felt like stepping into a world where her Arabic skills suddenly transformed her from invisible hotel employee to essential lifeline. "The boy's father doesn't speak English," she explained to Dr. Thessaly Brooks, the attending physician who had taken charge of Zayan's case. "I'll need to translate everything." Dr. Brooks, a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and the kind of competent authority that came from 20 years of pediatric emergencies, nodded gratefully. "Thank God you're here. We see cases like this more often than you'd think. International families in crisis with no way to communicate vital medical information." Zayan lay unconscious on the examination table, looking impossibly small beneath the tangle of IV lines and monitoring equipment that the paramedics had attached during the frantic ambulance ride. His dark hair was matted with sweat, and his breathing had stabilized into a more regular pattern, though he remained deeply unconscious from the combination of dehydration and whatever toxins had ravaged his small body. Tarnoon stood beside the examination table like a sentinel, one hand resting protectively on his son's forehead, while his eyes tracked every movement of the medical staff with the intensity of a man whose entire world balanced on this moment. He had changed from his sleeping clothes into a hastily assembled outfit, dark slacks and a white dress shirt that somehow managed to look elegant even in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the emergency room. "Sheikh al-Rashid," Oprah said gently in Arabic, "Dr. Brooks needs to know about Zayan's medical history. Has he ever had allergic reactions to foods or medications?" The formal address, using his title rather than his first name, established the respectful distance that their situation required, but Tarnoon found himself wishing she would speak to him with the same casual warmth she'd shown in the hotel corridor. There was something about the way she pronounced Arabic words that reminded him of his grandmother's voice, precise but filled with hidden music. "No allergies that we know of," he replied, his voice hoarse from hours of worry. "He's always been healthy, active. This came from nowhere." As Oprah translated, Dr. Brooks nodded and made notes on her tablet. "Ask him about the timeline. When did the symptoms start, and what did the boy eat in the hours before he became ill?" The questions continued for 20 minutes, a careful reconstruction of Zayan's evening that painted a clear picture of classic seafood poisoning, likely from contaminated oysters that had been served as part of the hotel's authentic New York experience dinner. With each translated exchange, Oprah found herself studying Tarnoon's face, noting the way worry had carved temporary lines around his dark eyes, the careful control he maintained over emotions that clearly threatened to overwhelm him. "The good news," Dr. Brooks finally announced, "is that this appears to be straightforward food poisoning, though severe. We're pumping his stomach, flooding his system with IV fluids, and administering activated charcoal to absorb any remaining toxins. He should be conscious within a few hours." When Oprah translated this prognosis, Tarnoon's entire body sagged with relief. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, he allowed himself to believe that his son would survive, that this trip to America wouldn't end in the kind of tragedy that would haunt him forever. "Shukran," he said to Oprah, the simple Arabic word for thank you carrying the weight of infinite gratitude. "Without you, I don't know what would have happened." "You don't need to thank me," she replied softly. "Any mother would have done the same thing." The words, "any mother," hung in the air between them, both recognizing the unintentional intimacy of the statement. Oprah had spoken from the heart, responding to Zayan's crisis with maternal instincts that surprised her with their intensity. Tanoon heard in her words an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed in the space of a single night, a connection that transcended their different worlds. "Where is your wife?" Dr. Brooks asked through Oprah's translation. "We'll need to update both parents on the treatment plan." The question hit Tanoon like a physical blow, bringing back the reality he'd temporarily forgotten in the crisis of Zayan's illness. When Oprah translated Dr. Brooks's inquiry, she saw something shift in his expression, pain that had nothing to do with his son's medical condition. "My wife," he began, then stopped, clearly struggling with how to explain Amina's abandonment to a stranger. "My wife is not available." Oprah heard the careful neutrality in his voice and recognized the sound of someone protecting painful secrets. She had perfected the same tone during her own difficult periods, the year her mother had been dying, the months after her divorce, the lonely nights in Dubai when she'd realized that Hassan al-Mahmoud would never choose love over family expectations. "She's dealing with some personal issues," Oprah translated diplomatically, editing Tanoon's response to preserve his dignity while giving Dr. Brooks the essential information. Dr. Brooks accepted this explanation without comment. She'd seen enough family crises to know that medical emergencies often revealed cracks in relationships that had been carefully hidden. "Well, the important thing is that Zayan has one parent here who clearly adores him. That's what matters for his recovery." As the medical team moved Zayan to a private room in the pediatric wing, Oprah found herself naturally falling into step beside Tanoon, translating the continuous stream of information about IV schedules, monitoring protocols, and visiting hour restrictions. She had called the plaza to explain her absence, using vacation time she'd been saving for a trip home to Boston, but somehow returning to her normal routine felt impossible while this crisis remained unresolved. "You should go," Tanoon said quietly as they settled into the uncomfortable chairs beside Zayan's hospital bed. "You've already done more than anyone could ask. Your job, your responsibilities." "My responsibilities right now are here," Oprah interrupted gently. "Zayan is going to wake up confused and scared. He'll need someone who can explain what happened in words he understands." The simple declaration hit Tanoon with unexpected force. This woman, this stranger who had appeared like an answer to prayer, was choosing to stay with them, choosing to put their needs before her own convenience. In his world of business relationships and calculated alliances, such selfless generosity was rare enough to feel miraculous. "Why?" he asked, studying her face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "Why are you helping us like this?" Oprah was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Zayan's peaceful face. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of memories that reached across continents and years. "When I worked in Dubai, I took care of 3 children for the Al-Mahmoud family. The youngest, Layla, was about Zayan's age when she had an allergic reaction to something she ate at a friend's birthday party. I sat beside her hospital bed for 3 days, translating for doctors, holding her hand when she cried for her mama." She paused, a slight smile crossing her features. "Children shouldn't have to be afraid because the adults around them can't communicate, and parents shouldn't have to watch their babies suffer while feeling helpless to help." The story revealed layers of experience and compassion that made Tanoon see her differently, not just as a hotel employee who happened to speak Arabic, but as a woman who had lived in his world, who understood the particular fears and joys of raising children across cultural boundaries. "Tell me about Dubai," he said quietly. "What brought you there? What brought you back?" And so, in the hushed atmosphere of a New York hospital room, while his son slept peacefully under medical supervision, Tanoon learned about Oprah's journey, her love of languages, her years caring for the Al-Mahmoud children, her complicated relationship with Hassan that had ended when family duty trumped personal desire. In return, he found himself sharing details about his own life, that he rarely discussed. The pressure of running a business empire, the loneliness of a marriage that had been more arrangement than romance, his dreams of showing Zayan the wider world beyond Dubai's golden borders. As dawn light began filtering through the hospital windows, painting everything in soft shades of possibility, neither of them realized that their conversation had shifted into something deeper than crisis management. They were two souls, recognizing kindred experiences, building bridges across the differences in their backgrounds through the universal language of caring for children and dreams deferred. When Zayan's eyes finally fluttered open near sunrise, the first face he saw was Oprah's, and the first words he heard were her gentle Arabic reassurance that he was safe, that his father was there, that everything would be all right. "Mama?" he whispered in confusion, the fever and disorientation making him mistake her for the mother who had abandoned them. "No, Habibi," Oprah replied softly, taking his small hand in hers. "I'm Oprah, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Chapter 3. Betrayal's Shadow. The cruelest betrayals come not from enemies who never loved us, but from those who promised to love us forever and chose to break that promise when we needed them most. The morning light streaming through Mount Sinai's pediatric ward windows should have brought relief, but for Tahnoon, it only illuminated the devastating reality he'd been avoiding since the crisis began. Zayan was recovering beautifully, sitting up in bed, sipping clear broth, and charming the nursing staff with his polite English phrases that Oprah had been teaching him. But with his son's health no longer in immediate danger, Tahnoon could no longer postpone confronting the fact that his wife had vanished during their child's medical emergency. Oprah noticed the change in his demeanor as she returned from the hospital cafeteria with coffee and pastries. Where yesterday's panic had been replaced by relief, now she saw a different kind of pain etched in the lines around his dark eyes, the particular anguish that came from personal betrayal rather than medical fear. "You need to tell me what really happened with your wife," she said quietly in Arabic, settling into the chair beside Zayan's bed. "If we're going to help Zayan through this, I need to understand the whole situation." Tahnoon glanced toward his son, who was absorbed in coloring books that a sympathetic nurse had provided, then back to Oprah's expectant face. In the past 24 hours, this woman had become his lifeline, his translator, his bridge to navigating an impossible situation. She deserved to know the truth. "Amina left," he said simply, the words falling like stones into the quiet morning air. "Not just the hospital, not just temporarily. She left us, permanently." Oprah felt her stomach clench with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "During Zayan's medical emergency?" "She was gone before the emergency even began," Tahnoon replied, his voice carefully controlled. "We had dinner at the hotel restaurant, came back to the suite around 9. Zayan started feeling sick around 11, but Amina she'd already decided to leave us." He pulled out his phone and showed Oprah a photograph of a note written in elegant Arabic script on Plaza Hotel letterhead. As she read the words, her expression shifted from sympathy to outrage. "Tahnoon, I can't pretend to be happy anymore. 15 years of marriage to a man who loves his business more than his family has drained everything from me. I'm leaving with someone who actually sees me, who values me. Don't look for me. I won't be coming back. Amina." "She left this on the bathroom mirror and disappeared," Tahnoon continued. "When Zayan started having seizures, when I was screaming for help in a language no one understood, she was already gone, probably already with him." "Him?" Oprah asked, though she could guess the answer from the bitter pain in Tahnoon's voice. "Rashid Mansouri, my business partner, my closest friend for 10 years. The words came out like shards of glass, each one cutting deeper. "Apparently they've been having an affair for months. While I was traveling for business, while I thought I was building a life for our family, they were planning their future together." The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. Not only had Amina abandoned her husband and son during a medical crisis, but she'd done so for another man. And not just any man, but Tahnoon's trusted business partner. The cruelty was so calculated it left Oprah speechless. "How do you know about Rashid?" she asked gently. Tahnoon's phone buzzed with an incoming text, and his face went pale as he read the message. Without speaking, he handed the device to Oprah, who read the Arabic text with growing horror. "We're in Miami now. Beautiful city, much more exciting than Dubai. Don't worry about the business. Rashid says he can handle your clients while you're playing tourist in New York. Hope Zion feels better soon." The casual cruelty of the message, referencing their son's illness as an afterthought while bragging about her romantic getaway, made Oprah want to throw the phone against the wall. Instead, she set it down carefully and looked at Tahnoon with something fierce burning in her dark eyes. "She knows Zion was seriously ill and she's sending vacation updates?" "She knows everything," Tahnoon replied flatly. "I called her 16 times yesterday during the crisis. She answered once, long enough to hear me say that Zion was in the hospital, then hung up. That text is her way of letting me know she doesn't care." Oprah stood up abruptly and walked to the window, needing to put distance between herself and the phone before she said something that would make Tahnoon's pain worse. She'd experienced betrayal before, Hassan's gentle rejection when his family pressured him to marry within their social circle, but this was a different category of cruelty entirely. "Baba!" Zion called from his bed, his voice still weak but curious. "Why does Mama keep texting you if she's not coming to see me?" The innocent question hit both adults like a physical blow. Tahnoon moved to his son's bedside, smoothing the boy's dark hair with infinite tenderness. "Mama had to go home to Dubai early," he said carefully in Arabic. "She was worried about work." It was a kind lie, designed to protect an 8-year-old from the truth that his mother had chosen her own happiness over his well-being. But Zion was intelligent beyond his years, and he studied his father's face with the perceptive gaze of a child who sensed deeper truths. "Is that why you look so sad when you think I'm not watching?" Zion asked quietly. The question shattered Tahnoon's careful composure. His son had been fighting for his life, recovering from a medical emergency that could have killed him, and somehow he'd still noticed his father's emotional state. The guilt of that realization, that his own pain was visible to his sick child, nearly undid him completely. Oprah returned to his side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Zion, Habibi," she said in Arabic, "your father is sad because you were very sick and it scared him. Parents worry when their children are hurt, even after they start feeling better." Zion nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation, but his next words revealed how much he understood about the adult world around him. "I heard Mama yelling at Baba on the phone before we came to America," he said quietly. "She said she didn't want to come on this trip, that she didn't want to be around us anymore. Is that why she went home?" The brutal honesty of childhood had cut straight to the heart of the matter. Tahnoon closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that his son had been carrying this knowledge, that the breakdown of his marriage had been visible to Zion long before Amina's final abandonment. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," Oprah said gently, stepping into the conversation with the practiced ease of someone who'd helped children navigate difficult family situations. "Sometimes they forget what's really important. But what matters is that you have people who love you no matter what." "Do you love me?" Zion asked with the direct simplicity that only children could manage. The question caught Oprah off guard. In 36 hours, this little boy had somehow worked his way into her heart with his brave smile, his polite manners, and his obvious adoration for his father. The intensity of her affection for both of them surprised her with its depth. "Yes," she said without hesitation, "I love you very much, Habibi." Will you stay with us until I'm better? Oprah glanced at Tahnoon, seeing in his expression a mixture of hope and fear that mirrored her own feelings. Staying meant complications. Her job, her life in New York, the growing emotional attachment that was becoming harder to ignore with each passing hour. "I'll stay as long as you need me," she promised, and meant it completely. As Tahnoon's phone buzzed with another text from Amina, this one a photograph of her and Rashid toasting champagne on a Miami beach, Oprah made a silent vow. This little boy and his devastated father had been abandoned by someone who should have protected them. Whatever it cost her personally, she would not abandon them too. In the bright, sterile light of the hospital room, surrounded by the quiet sounds of healing, an unbreakable bond was forming between three people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances. Chapter 4. The Language of Hearts. Some conversations transcend words, creating bridges between souls that span continents, cultures, and the careful barriers we build around our wounded hearts. 3 days had passed since Zion's crisis, and Mount Sinai's pediatric ward had become an unlikely sanctuary where 3 lives intersected in ways none of them had expected. Zion was recovering with the resilience of childhood, his appetite returning along with his natural curiosity about everything American. Tahnoon had barely left his son's side except for brief trips to handle business calls and legal consultations about Amina's desertion. And Oprah had somehow transformed from hotel employee to essential family member, navigating between her regular job responsibilities and her growing commitment to these 2 people who had become precious to her. "Oprah," Zion called from his hospital bed, where he was working on English vocabulary with flashcards the speech therapist had provided. "How do you say shukran in English?" "Thank you," she replied, settling into the chair that had essentially become hers over the past few days. "But you can still say shukran if you want. Many Americans know some Arabic words now." "I want to learn perfect English like you," Zion declared, with the determination that marked everything he approached. "Baba says you speak 3 languages perfectly. Arabic, English, and what else?" "French," Oprah replied, amused by his intensity. "I studied it in college, then practiced it when I worked in Dubai with families who spoke French as well as Arabic." Tahnoon looked up from his laptop, where he'd been dealing with increasingly urgent emails from Dubai. The business implications of Amina and Rashid's affair were becoming clearer. Rashid had been systematically undermining client relationships, positioning himself as the more reliable partner, while Tahnoon was distracted by personal issues in America. "You never told me you spoke French," he said in Arabic, his voice carrying a note of surprise that made Oprah smile. "There are many things about me you don't know yet," she replied, switching effortlessly between languages as she addressed both father and son. "Just like there are things about both of you that I'm still discovering." The word "yet" hung in the air, with implications that none of them wanted to examine too closely. It suggested a future, a continued relationship beyond this medical crisis, possibilities that felt both wonderful and impossible. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Tahnoon said, closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. "Something that would surprise me." Oprah considered the question carefully. In the intensity of the past few days, they'd shared emergency information, medical histories, basic biographical details. But the deeper truths, the dreams and disappointments that shaped a person's soul, those remained carefully guarded. "I wanted to be a teacher originally," she said finally. "Elementary school, maybe kindergarten. I loved the idea of helping children discover the world through language and stories." "What changed your mind?" Zion asked, his English improving noticeably with each conversation. "Life changed my mind," Oprah replied with a slight smile that didn't quite hide the sadness underneath. "My mother got sick when I was in college, and I needed to work full-time to help with medical bills. The Al Mahmood family in Dubai offered better money than teaching positions in Boston, so I went where I could earn enough to help her. And she recovered? Tanoon asked gently, reading the shadows in her expression. No, she died 2 years into my time in Dubai, but by then I'd fallen in love with the work, with the family, with... She paused, then continued more carefully. With the culture, Arabic poetry, the warmth of extended family gatherings, the way children are treasured and protected. The unfinished sentence, the implicit reference to Hassan, was understood by Tanoon even though she hadn't spoken his name. He recognized the careful way she edited her own story, just as he edited his when discussing his marriage to Amina. I think you would have been a wonderful teacher, Zayan announced with the matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. You teach me things all the time, and you make everything sound interesting. Like what? Oprah asked, genuinely curious about how this bright boy perceived their interactions. Like yesterday, when you taught me about American hospitals being different from Dubai hospitals, but doctors everywhere caring about children the same way, and how you explained that English and Arabic use different music when people speak, but both languages can say beautiful things. Zayan paused thoughtfully. And how you told me that families can be born or chosen, and both kinds are real. The last observation made both adults pause. Neither of them remembered exactly when that conversation had happened, but clearly Zayan had been processing more than just vocabulary lessons during their time together. What about you, Baba? Zayan continued, turning to his father. Tell Oprah something she doesn't know about you. Tanoon was quiet for a long moment, clearly considering how much of himself to reveal. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability that Oprah hadn't heard before. I wanted to be a poet when I was young, he admitted. I wrote terrible verses about love and honor and the desert, convinced I would be the next great Arabic voice of my generation. Oprah's eyebrows rose in surprise. What happened to your poetry? My father happened, Tanoon replied with a rueful laugh. He said poets die poor and forgotten, but businessmen build legacies that last for generations. So I learned to write contracts instead of verses, negotiate deals instead of metaphors. Do you miss it? She asked quietly. I thought I didn't, he said, his gaze shifting to the window where New York City sprawled in all its chaotic glory. But since we've been here, since I've been speaking Arabic with you about real things instead of just business transactions, I remember why I loved words, how they can build bridges between people who should be strangers. The admission created an intimacy in the hospital room that made Oprah's pulse quicken. This successful, powerful man was showing her pieces of his younger self, dreams he'd set aside for duty and family expectations. Maybe you could write poetry again, she suggested. Different poetry. Poetry about being a father, about seeing the world through Zayan's eyes. Maybe I could, he agreed, and something in his tone suggested he was talking about more than just writing. I want to learn to write poetry too, Zayan announced, clearly not wanting to be left out of this discovery of hidden dreams. In both languages, Arabic poetry for Jadi and English poetry for American friends. Your grandfather would love that, Tanoon said, his expression softening at the mention of his father. He still writes traditional forms, though he pretends it's just for family letters. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation flowed between languages and topics with the ease of people who'd known each other for years rather than days. Oprah found herself sharing stories from her time in Dubai, the elaborate holiday celebrations, the way Arabic humor translated across cultures, the particular joy of watching children master new languages. Tanoon talked about raising Zayan as a single parent in all but name, about business trips that felt like exile from the only relationship that truly mattered to him. In Dubai we have a saying, Tanoon said as evening approached and the hospital began its transition to nighttime routines. Al-Qalb yasal an al-Qalb. The heart asks about the heart. It means that some connections transcend language, culture, circumstances. He was looking directly at Oprah as he spoke, and she felt the weight of his words like a physical presence in the room. The Arabic phrase was beautiful in its simplicity, but the way he said it, with careful precision and unmistakable meaning, made it sound like a declaration. "I know that saying," she replied softly. "Hassan's grandmother used to say it when she talked about how families are really formed, not just by blood, but by hearts that recognize each other." "Yes," Tahnoon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly like that." In the growing twilight of the hospital room, with Zayan drifting off to sleep between them, Oprah realized that somewhere in the past 4 days, her heart had begun asking questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer, questions about what it meant to care for someone else's child as if he were her own, to find herself looking forward to a man's smile more than anything else in her day, to discover that love could grow in the most unlikely circumstances and feel more real than anything she'd experienced before. As Tahnoon reached across the space between their chairs and gently took her hand, she didn't pull away. Some bridges, once built, were too beautiful to tear down. Chapter 5. Forbidden Boundaries. The cruelest obstacles to love are not mountains or oceans, but the invisible walls built by society's expectations and our own fears of crossing lines that were never meant to exist. The morning brought unwelcome visitors to Mount Sinai Hospital, and Oprah knew trouble was approaching the moment she saw 3 men in expensive suits speaking rapid Arabic as they emerged from the elevator bank. Their posture radiated the kind of authority that came with significant wealth and power, and even without understanding their conversation, she could sense their agitation from across the pediatric ward. She was reviewing Zayan's discharge paperwork at the nurses' station when she heard one of them mention Sheikh Tahnoon, with the sharp tone of men who'd come to deliver ultimatums rather than support. Her Arabic comprehension, honed by years in Dubai, picked up fragments of their conversation that made her stomach clench with dread. Completely irresponsible to abandon business during a crisis. Rashid is making serious moves while he plays house with that hotel worker. This fantasy needs to end before it destroys everything. Oprah felt her cheeks burn with anger and humiliation. They were talking about her as if she was some kind of opportunistic threat, a woman who'd manipulated a vulnerable situation for personal gain. The reduction of their beautiful, complicated relationship to playing house with that hotel worker felt like a slap across the face. She was still processing their words when Dr. Brooks appeared beside her, clipboard in hand and a concerned expression on her face. "Oprah, I need to speak with you privately," Dr. Brooks said, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone about to deliver difficult news. "Could you step into my office for a moment?" The request felt ominous, and Oprah's intuition proved correct the moment she sat down across from the doctor who'd become an ally over the past week. "I've received some inquiries about your relationship with the Al-Rashid family," Dr. Brooks began carefully. "Questions about the appropriateness of a non-family member being so involved in a patient's care, especially when that involvement extends well beyond normal translation services." "Who's asking these questions?" Oprah replied, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Hospital administration received a call this morning from someone claiming to represent Sheikh Al-Rashid's business interests. They expressed concern about unauthorized personnel having access to confidential medical information and suggested that your involvement might be financially motivated." The implication was clear and insulting. Someone, probably one of the men she'd just seen, was suggesting she was somehow taking advantage of Tahnoon's vulnerable emotional state for money or personal gain. The accusation was particularly cruel, given that she'd been using her own vacation time and personal resources to help them. "Dr. Brooks," Oprah said quietly, "I need you to know that I've never accepted anything from Sheikh Al-Rashid beyond gratitude. I've helped them because Zayan needed someone who could translate, and because—" She paused, struggling to articulate the complex emotions involved. "Because they became important to me." "I believe you completely," Dr. Brooks replied, her voice warm with sympathy. "But perception matters in situations like this, especially when significant money and international business interests are involved. These men have lawyers, Oprah. They have connections and influence that could make your life very difficult if they choose to pursue this." The warning was delivered with genuine care, but it felt like a door slamming shut on the most meaningful week of Oprah's life. She thought about Zayan's bright smile when she taught him new English words, about Tanun's gentle hands as he smoothed his son's hair, about the way their conversations flowed between languages like music. "What are you saying?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew. "I'm saying that for your own protection, and for the sake of your job at the plaza, you might want to consider stepping back from this situation. Let the family handle their discharge and recovery without your direct involvement." The suggestion felt like being asked to cut off her own arm. Over the past week, she'd become emotionally invested in Zayan's recovery and Tanun's well-being in ways that transcended professional obligation. The idea of abandoning them now, when they still needed support, went against every instinct she possessed. "And if I don't step back?" Dr. Brooks's expression grew more serious. "Then you need to understand that you're walking into a situation with cultural, legal, and financial complexities that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. These aren't just rich tourists, Oprah. These are people with international business empires, complex family obligations, and social expectations that don't easily accommodate unconventional relationships." The word unconventional hung in the air like an accusation. A Black American woman and an Arab billionaire, their different worlds, different backgrounds, different social positions, making their connection automatically suspect in the eyes of people who reduced love to equations of status and appropriateness. When Oprah returned to Zayan's room, she found Tanun in intense conversation with the three men she'd seen earlier. Their Arabic was rapid, heated, filled with the kind of business terminology that left no doubt about the pressure being applied. "The Dubai office is in chaos without your leadership. Rashid is telling clients you've abandoned your responsibilities for a personal relationship. This woman, whatever her intentions, is becoming a liability to your reputation." Zayan was awake, watching the adult conversation with the wide-eyed concern of a child who sensed conflict without understanding its source. When he saw Oprah in the doorway, his face lit up with relief. "Oprah, come tell these men how well I speak English now," he called out in perfectly pronounced English, clearly proud of his linguistic progress. The three businessmen turned to look at her with expressions ranging from curious assessment to barely concealed hostility. She felt their judgment like a physical weight. This was the hotel worker who'd somehow inserted herself into their colleague's life, the foreign woman who represented a threat to their carefully ordered world. "Gentlemen," Tanun said quietly in Arabic, his voice carrying unmistakable authority, "this is Oprah Winfrey, the woman who saved my son's life when he was dying, and I couldn't make anyone understand what was happening. Whatever business concerns you have, they don't give you the right to speak disrespectfully about her." The defense was swift and uncompromising, but Oprah could see the cost it extracted from him. These were his business partners, men whose cooperation he needed to maintain the empire he'd spent years building. Standing up for her meant potentially jeopardizing relationships that affected not just his wealth, but his ability to provide for Zayan's future. "Of course we respect her assistance during the medical emergency," the eldest of the three replied smoothly. "But surely you understand that your continued association with her is being misinterpreted by people back home. Amina's lawyers are already suggesting that your relationship with this woman predated her departure, that perhaps her leaving was justified." The accusation hit like a thunderbolt. They were suggesting that Oprah was somehow responsible for the breakdown of Tarnoon's marriage, that she was a homewrecker rather than someone who'd appeared after Amina's abandonment. The cruelty of the implication took her breath away. "That's enough," Tarnoon said, his voice dangerously quiet. "My marriage ended because my wife chose to leave with my business partner while our son was fighting for his life. Oprah had nothing to do with that decision." "Perhaps not," another man replied. "But appearances matter, Tarnoon. Your reputation, your custody of Zion, your business relationships, all of these things can be damaged by associations that seem inappropriate." The word inappropriate felt like a slap. Oprah saw Zayn's confusion as he tried to follow the rapid Arabic, saw Tarnoon's jaw tighten with controlled anger, saw the careful way these powerful men were dismantling the beautiful thing that had grown between them with surgical precision. "I think," she said quietly in Arabic, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest, "that I should give you privacy to discuss your business matters." She moved towards Zayn's bed to say goodbye, but the little boy's hand shot out to grab hers with surprising strength. "You're not leaving, are you?" he asked in English, his eyes wide with the fear of another abandonment. "You promised you'd stay until I was better." The promise, made with love and sincerity, now felt like chains binding her to a situation that was becoming more impossible by the moment. She looked at Tarnoon, seeing in his expression the same conflict that was tearing her apart. The desire to fight for what they'd found together, warring against the practical knowledge that their different worlds made such a fight almost impossible to win. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the quiet beeping of medical equipment and the weight of social expectations, Oprah realized that sometimes love wasn't enough to overcome the barriers that society built around the heart. Chapter 6. Impossible Dreams. The most beautiful dreams are often those that bloom in impossible soil, creating gardens of hope that logic insists cannot survive, but the heart refuses to abandon. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Zayn's hospital room as the business delegation finally departed, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unspoken tensions and difficult choices. Tarnoon had managed to postpone their demands for his immediate return to Dubai, but the reprieve felt temporary, a brief pause before forces beyond their control would tear apart the fragile world they'd built together over the past week. Zayn had been discharged with a clean bill of health, his young body having recovered completely from the food poisoning that had brought them all together. But instead of celebrating, the three of them sat in contemplative silence, each processing the new reality that outside pressures were threatening to end their unexpected family unit before it had truly begun. The silence stretched until Zayn, with the impatience of childhood, decided to take matters into his own capable hands. He had been planning this conversation for days, waiting for the right moment when the adults weren't distracted by medical procedures or business crises. Now, with his father's colleagues gone and the immediate medical danger past, seemed like the perfect opportunity to address what he considered the obvious solution to everyone's problems. "I have an idea," he announced in English, sitting up straighter in his hospital bed with the authority of someone about to deliver an important presentation. "Instead of everyone being sad about impossible things, why don't we talk about possible things?" Both adults turned toward him with surprise, struck by the mature tone in his young voice. Oprah moved her chair closer to his bed, while Tarnoon abandoned his brooding position by the window to give his son his full attention. "What possible things, Habibi?" Oprah asked gently, though she suspected she was about to be impressed by 8-year-old logic. "Well," Zayn began, switching to Arabic to ensure his father understood every word, "Baba is sad because he thinks he has to choose between business and family. Oprah is sad because she thinks she doesn't belong in our world. And I'm sad because everyone keeps talking about endings instead of beginnings." The accuracy of his assessment left both adults speechless. In a few sentences, this child had identified the core fears that were keeping them from pursuing their obvious happiness together. "But here's what I think," Zayan continued, gaining confidence as he spoke. "Families aren't about where you live or what language you speak or what other people think. Families are about people who take care of each other, like how Oprah took care of me when I was sick, and how Baba takes care of both of us all the time, and how I want to take care of both of you forever." Oprah felt tears prick at her eyes as she listened to this wise little boy articulate truths that the adults had been too afraid to voice. "Tell me more about your idea, Habibti." "Well, first, tell me about your dreams," Zayan said, clearly having planned this conversation carefully. "Not your worried thoughts about why things can't work, but your real dreams about what you want your life to look like." Oprah exchanged a glance with Tanun, seeing in his expression the same mixture of hope and trepidation she felt. "If you could do anything in the world when you grow up, what would it be?" she asked Zayan, redirecting the question to give herself time to gather courage. Zayan considered the question with the seriousness he brought to all important matters. "I want to be a bridge," he said finally in English, then repeated it in Arabic for his father's benefit. "Jisr, a bridge between worlds." "A bridge?" Tanun asked, momentarily pulled from his brooding contemplation of the business crisis awaiting him in Dubai. "Like Oprah," Zayan explained with the clarity that only children possessed. "She's a bridge between our Arabic world and this American world. She helps people understand each other when they speak different languages or come from different places. When I grow up, I want to help families like ours, families that love each other but come from different countries." The innocent wisdom of his answer hit both adults with unexpected force. In a week of medical crises and business pressures, an 8-year-old had identified exactly what made Oprah so essential to their lives. She was indeed a bridge, someone who could navigate between cultures with the kind of natural grace that made the impossible seem effortless. "That's a beautiful dream," Oprah said softly, her throat tight with emotion. "The world needs more bridges." "Exactly," Zayan said, clearly pleased that she understood his vision. "And if you marry Baba and become my real mama, then you could teach me how to be a bridge too. We could help other families figure out how to love each other across different worlds." The word marry dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water, sending ripples of possibility in all directions. Neither adult had been brave enough to speak it aloud, but Zayan had no such reservations about stating the obvious solution. "Will you teach me how to be one?" Zayan asked, switching back to Arabic as his excitement grew. "When we go back to Dubai, will you come with us and teach me how to help people understand each other? And maybe we could come back to New York sometimes too, so I can practice my English and learn about American families." The question hung in the air like a prayer neither adult dared to answer. The business delegation had made it clear that Oprah's presence in Tanun's life was seen as a liability, a threat to his reputation and business relationships. The idea of her accompanying them to Dubai, of becoming a permanent part of their lives, seemed as impossible as asking the moon to relocate to Earth. "Zayan," Tanun said gently, "Oprah has her own life here in New York. Her job, her friends, her family. We can't ask her to give up everything for us." But even as he spoke the practical words, his eyes met Oprah's across the room with an intensity that suggested he was asking exactly that, not with words, but with the desperate hope of a man who'd found something precious and couldn't bear to lose it. "But what if she wants to?" Zayan asked, with the logical directness that adults found both charming and terrifying. "What if she wants to have a bigger life, a more important life, instead of just working at a hotel forever?" The question hung in the air with uncomfortable accuracy. Oprah had been asking herself the same thing for days, wondering if her quiet life in New York was truly fulfilling or simply safe and predictable. What if I wanted to? Oprah heard herself asking, the words escaping before her rational mind could stop them. What if I wanted to give up my life here for something better, something that mattered more? The admission created a charged silence in the room. Tanun's breath caught, while Zayan looked between them with the satisfied expression of someone whose fondest wish was suddenly becoming possible. "You would really do that?" Tanun asked quietly, moving closer to her chair. "Leave everything you know, everything that's safe and familiar, to come to a place where you'd be a foreigner, where people would question your motives and judge your relationship with us?" "I've been a foreigner before," Oprah replied, thinking of her years in Dubai with the Al Mahmoud family. "I know what it's like to adapt to a new culture, to prove myself in a place where I don't automatically belong. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And Dubai felt like home to me in ways that Boston never did." "But this would be different," Tanun said, though he was moving even closer now, drawn by her words despite his caution. "You would be coming as... what? My employee? My friend? My..." He didn't finish the sentence, but the unspoken word, wife, seemed to echo in the quiet room anyway. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying, a possibility so beautiful it felt dangerous to even contemplate. "She would be coming as my mama," Zayan interjected matter-of-factly, "and your wife, and my Arabic teacher, and maybe she could help other American ladies learn about our culture, and help our ladies learn about American culture. She could have lots of important jobs instead of just one boring one." The 8-year-old's practical approach to their complicated situation made both adults smile despite the emotional intensity of the moment. In Zayan's world, love was reason enough for any choice, and practical obstacles were simply problems to be solved with sufficient creativity and determination. "I would be coming as someone who loves you," Oprah said simply, looking directly into Tanun's eyes. "Both of you. Whatever title that requires, whatever legal arrangements need to be made, whatever social obstacles we have to navigate, I would be coming because my heart is already there." The declaration was braver than anything she'd ever said, a leap of faith that left her feeling exposed and exhilarated at the same time. She watched Tanun's expression cycle through surprise, hope, and something that looked remarkably like relief. "Ana Bahebik," he said quietly, his voice barely audible but carrying clearly in the hospital room's silence. "I love you too. Not just for what you've done for Zayan, not just for the way you've held us together during this crisis, but for who you are. The woman who speaks 3 languages but makes every conversation feel like poetry. The woman who sees possibilities where others see problems." He reached out to take her hands, his thumb tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. "The woman who somehow makes my son dream about building bridges instead of walls." "That's because she's already a bridge," Zayan said proudly. "Between sad Baba and happy Baba, between sick me and healthy me, between our old family that was broken and our new family that could be perfect." The observation was so perceptive it took both adults' breath away. This child had been watching, understanding, hoping for their happiness, with the pure heart of someone who believed love could conquer any obstacle. "Ana Bahebik," he said quietly, his voice barely audible but carrying clearly in the hospital room's silence. "I love you too. Not just for what you've done for Zayan, not just for the way you've held us together during this crisis, but for who you are. The woman who speaks 3 languages but makes every conversation feel like poetry. The woman who sees possibilities where others see problems." He turned to face her, his dark eyes bright with unshed tears of hope and fear. "But love isn't always enough, Habibti. My world, my responsibilities, the expectations of family and business partners, they don't disappear just because we've found each other. Then we make new expectations, Oprah replied with quiet determination. We build something that works for us, not for other people's ideas of what's appropriate or proper. It won't be easy, Tanoon warned, though his voice carried more hope than caution now. There will be people who question your motives, who assume you're with me for money or status. There will be cultural differences, language barriers in social situations, business associates who don't understand why I chose to marry outside my culture. The word marry hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Neither had explicitly proposed or accepted, but somehow the conversation had evolved naturally toward that conclusion, as if their hearts had been negotiating the details while their minds were still catching up. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Oprah asked directly, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Tanoon stood and moved to her chair, stopping close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with hospital antiseptic, and something uniquely him. "I'm asking if you would consider building a life with us," he said carefully. "Not just as my wife, but as Zayan's mother, as a partner in creating something new, a family that bridges our different worlds." "Yes," she said without hesitation, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes to all of it." From his position on the hospital bed, Zayan let out a whoop of joy that could probably be heard in 3 states. "Does this mean Oprah is going to be my mama now?" he asked in English, bouncing with excitement. "If she wants to be," Tanoon replied, his eyes never leaving Oprah's face. "If she's brave enough to take on 2 Al-Rashid men and all the complications that come with us." "I think I can handle the challenge," Oprah said, reaching out to take Tanoon's hands in hers. "After all, I've already survived a week with both of you, and I'm still here." Their fingers intertwined with the natural ease of pieces finding their proper place in a puzzle, and in that moment, the business pressures and cultural obstacles felt manageable, challenges to be overcome rather than insurmountable barriers. "So when can we have the wedding?" Zayan asked practically. "And can we have it in both languages? And can I help plan it? And will we live in Dubai and New York and—" "Slow down, Habibi," Oprah laughed, her heart full of joy at his enthusiasm. "We have time to plan all of that together." "But we will plan it together?" he asked seriously. "All 3 of us, as a real family?" "Yes," Tanoon said firmly, squeezing Oprah's hands. "All 3 of us, as a real family." But even as hope bloomed in the sterile hospital room, none of them could have predicted the devastating phone call that would arrive within the hour, threatening to destroy their beautiful, impossible dream before it had time to take root. Chapter 7. Sacrifice and Storms. The cruelest form of love is sometimes the kind that demands we sacrifice our own happiness to protect those we cherish most, breaking our hearts in service of a greater good we pray they'll someday understand. The phone call came at sunset, when the hospital room was painted in shades of gold and possibility, and their newly declared love felt strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Tanoon had been helping Zayan pack his few belongings, while Oprah handled the discharge paperwork, all 3 of them buzzing with the excitement of planning their future together. The intrusion of his ringtone felt like a discordant note in their perfect symphony. "It's my lawyer in Dubai," Tanoon said, glancing at the caller ID with mild surprise. "Abdul Rahman never calls unless it's urgent." He answered in Arabic, his voice initially calm and businesslike, but Oprah watched his expression change dramatically as the conversation progressed. The color drained from his face, his free hand clenched into a fist, and his rapid responses became increasingly agitated. "That's impossible," he said sharply. "On what grounds? She abandoned our son during a medical emergency." Oprah felt ice form in her stomach as she began to understand the direction of the call. Zayan, sensing the shift in his father's mood, moved closer to her side, unconsciously seeking comfort from the woman who had become his anchor in this strange American adventure. "What do you mean she has photographs?" Tanun's voice rose with barely controlled fury. What kind of photographs? The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, growing more heated with each exchange. When Tanun finally hung up, his hands were shaking with rage and something that looked dangerously close to despair. What's happened? Oprah asked quietly, though she suspected the answer would shatter the beautiful future they'd been planning. Amina has filed for divorce and sole custody of Zayan, Tanun said, his voice flat with shock. Her lawyers are claiming that I'm an unfit father because I'm having an affair with a foreign woman while my son was hospitalized. The accusation hit the room like a physical blow. Oprah felt her knees weaken as the implications became clear. Their innocent, beautiful love was being twisted into something sordid and calculating, used as ammunition in a custody battle that could separate Tanun from his son forever. But that's not true, she protested. We didn't even meet until Zayan was already sick. Our relationship developed after she abandoned you both. Truth doesn't matter, Tanun replied bitterly. Perception matters. And Amina's private investigators have been watching us. They have photographs of us holding hands in the hospital, of you staying overnight in my hotel suite to help with Zayan's care, of us looking at each other like people in love. The last words came out like an accusation against himself, as if falling in love had been a crime rather than a miracle. Oprah saw him retreating into the cold, controlled businessman she'd first met, walls rising to protect himself from further emotional damage. What else did your lawyer say? She asked, dreading the answer. That if I return to Dubai with you, if I marry you as we discussed, Amina's case becomes stronger. A judge might see it as confirmation that I prioritized my personal desires over my son's welfare, that I brought a foreign woman into Zayan's life during a traumatic period and confused him about family stability. Zayan had been following the Arabic conversation with increasing distress, his 8-year-old mind struggling to process the adult complexities that threatened his newfound happiness. Baba, he said in a small voice, are they trying to take me away from you? The question broke Tanun's remaining composure. He knelt beside his son, pulling him into a fierce embrace that spoke of love and protection and desperate fear. No one will take you away from me, Habibi, he promised in Arabic. Baba will do whatever it takes to keep us together. But even as he made the promise, Oprah could see the terrible calculation taking place behind his eyes. Whatever it takes. Those words carried a weight that made her stomach clench with dread. There's more, Tanun continued, his voice muffled against Zayan's hair. Rashid has been destroying my business relationships while we've been here. 3 major clients have terminated their contracts, citing concerns about my instability and poor judgment. The board of directors is calling for an emergency meeting to discuss my leadership of the company. The scope of the coordinated attack was breathtaking. Amina and Rashid weren't just stealing Tanun's personal life. They were systematically dismantling his professional world as well, using his love for Oprah as justification for both betrayals. So what do we do? Oprah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Tanun gently released Zayan and stood, walking to the window where the Manhattan skyline glittered with promise that now felt cruelly false. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man making the most difficult decision of his life. I have to go back to Dubai, immediately, without you. The words landed like bullets, each one finding its mark with devastating precision. Oprah felt the beautiful future they'd planned, dissolving like sugar in rain, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of dreams that would never be realized. Tanun, no, she whispered. We can fight this together. We can prove that our relationship isn't what they're claiming. How? He asked, turning to face her with eyes that had gone cold with necessity. How do we prove that love isn't selfish when every choice I make to be with you potentially hurts my son? How do I choose my happiness over Zayan's security? By refusing to let them win, Oprah replied desperately. by standing up to their lies and blackmail instead of giving them exactly what they want. "What they want is for me to lose my son," Tanoon said quietly. "If I bring you to Dubai, if I marry you and create a scandal that gives Amina ammunition for her custody case, they might get exactly that. Is your happiness, is our happiness, worth that risk?" The question hung in the air like a sword, cutting through every argument she might have made. Because the terrible truth was that their love, however pure and beautiful, could indeed be used to destroy the relationship that mattered most to Tanoon, his bond with his son. "There has to be another way," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe someday," Tanoon replied, "when the custody issues are resolved, when my business is stable again, when the scandal dies down and people forget about the foreign woman who stole a grieving man's heart while his son was dying." The clinical way he described their relationship, as if it were indeed some tawdry affair rather than the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to any of them, made Oprah feel like she was being erased in real time. "And what am I supposed to do in the meantime?" she asked. "Wait in New York for some hypothetical future when it's convenient for you to love me?" "I'm not asking you to wait," Tanoon said, and the words cut deeper than outright rejection. "I'm asking you to understand that sometimes love means letting go, even when it destroys us." From his position between them, Zayan began to cry, not the dramatic tears of childhood disappointment, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of someone who understood that the adults were about to tear apart his world again. "Please don't leave me, Oprah," he whispered in English. "Please don't be like Mama." The comparison to Amina, to the woman who had abandoned them both, hit Oprah like a physical blow. But she realized with devastating clarity that staying would indeed make her like Amina, choosing her own desires over Zayan's well-being, even if the choice came from love rather than selfishness. "I'm not leaving you, Habibi," she said, kneeling to hold him close. I'm going to love you from far away for a while. But that love will always be there, even when you can't see me." As Tanoon made arrangements for their immediate return to Dubai, and as Oprah prepared to say goodbye to the family she'd known for barely a week, but loved more than life itself, none of them could have imagined that their separation would last not weeks or months, but an entire year, 12 long months during which their hearts would remain connected across an ocean of impossible circumstances. Chapter 8. Letters Across Oceans. Distance may separate hearts across continents, but love writes its own geography, creating maps of longing that transcend every border and bridge, every impossible mile. 1 year. 365 days since Oprah had watched Tanoon and Zayan disappear through the departure gate at JFK Airport, taking with them pieces of her heart she would never recover. The mathematics of missing someone were brutal in their precision. 52 weeks of waking up alone, 12 months of checking her phone for messages that came too rarely, countless hours of staring at the last photograph she'd taken of them together in Zayan's hospital room. Now, sitting in her apartment on West 84th Street on a crisp October morning that reminded her painfully of the day they'd first met, Oprah spread their correspondence across her coffee table like artifacts from an archaeological dig of her own emotions. 39 letters she'd sent in return, each one a piece of her soul dispatched to a world that felt increasingly like a beautiful dream she'd once lived. The first letter had arrived 3 weeks after their departure, forwarded through a complex network of medical professionals and cultural organizations that made their communication feel both precious and clandestine. My dearest Oprah, I'm writing this letter in the business lounge at Dubai International Airport, having just landed from the longest flight of my life. Not because of the distance traveled, but because every mile took me further from the woman who saved our lives and stole our hearts in the space of a single week. Zayan has been inconsolable since we left New York. He asks for his American mama every morning when he wakes up and every night before he goes to sleep. I have told him that you are working very hard to help other families like ours, but I don't think he understands why helping other people means we cannot be together. I don't understand it either. The custody hearing was a nightmare, but we survived it. Amina's lawyers could not make their claims stick when 3 hospital workers testified about her abandonment during Zayan's crisis. She has visitation rights, which she has not yet exercised, and I have primary custody of our son. But the cost of this victory feels hollow when I consider what I had to sacrifice to achieve it. I think of you every day. I dream of you every night. I wonder if you think of us at all, or if you have moved on to a life that makes more sense than the impossible love we shared for one perfect week. Ana bahebik, ya nur aini. I love you, light of my eyes. Tanun. Her response had been written through tears that blurred her carefully practiced Arabic script. Habibi. Of course I think of you, of both of you, every minute of every day. I have returned to my work at the plaza, but everything feels different now. The Arabic families who stay here remind me of the warmth I found in your world. The children in the lobby make me think of Zayan's bright smile and his determination to be a bridge between cultures. I have enrolled in advanced Arabic classes at Columbia University. My professor says I have a gift for poetry, though I think what she's really noticing is that all my practice exercises are love letters I'll never send. Please tell Zayan that his American mama loves him more than all the stars in both our skies. Tell him that I'm learning more Arabic so that someday, when we see each other again, I can tell him stories in the language of his heart. I don't know if that someday will ever come, but I choose to believe in impossible things. Ana bahebak, ya habib albi. I love you, beloved of my heart. Oprah. The correspondence had continued throughout the seasons, creating a parallel relationship that existed entirely in written words and shared memories. Through Tanun's letters, Oprah followed Zayan's recovery from their traumatic New York experience, his gradual acceptance of his mother's absence, his excitement about starting at a new international school where he could practice his English. Through her letters, Tanun learned about Oprah's promotion to Director of International Guest Services at the Plaza, her growing reputation as a cultural liaison for wealthy Middle Eastern families, her quiet evenings spent reading Arabic poetry and remembering the sound of his voice reciting verses in their hospital room sanctuary. By winter, their letters had evolved from careful updates to intimate exchanges that revealed the depths of their continued connection. Habibti. The business is finally stable again. Rashid's betrayal damaged some relationships, but not as badly as he hoped. Many of our clients were disgusted by his behavior toward a grieving father and sick child. Some things transcend business considerations, and basic human decency is apparently one of them. I have been working with international medical charities, helping to establish treatment protocols for Middle Eastern children who need specialized care in Western hospitals. It's meaningful work, though I suspect you can guess why it appeals to me. Every family I help reminds me of our week together, of the miracle of finding you when we needed you most. Zayan has written you a letter in English. He's quite proud of his improvement, though he still prefers Arabic when he's tired or upset. I haven't read what he wrote, but I suspect it contains marriage proposals on my behalf. He remains convinced that you are meant to be his mother, and that geography is merely an obstacle to be overcome with sufficient determination. From the mouths of babes, as you Americans say. I find myself dreaming of possibilities I'm afraid to voice. What if love could indeed conquer geography? What if the obstacles that seem insurmountable are really just elaborate tests of our commitment? What if the universe brought us together for a reason that transcends the convenient logic of staying in our separate worlds? Ana ashtagilak kol yom. I miss you every day. With all my love. Tarnoon. P.S. I have enclosed a photograph of Zayan on his first day at the new international school. He insisted on wearing the Red Sox cap you sent him, claiming it would help him remember his English lessons. He looks so grown up, so confident. He gets that from you, I think. The courage to bridge worlds. Summer brought letters filled with growing confidence and carefully planned hope. Ya Habib Albi. I received Zayan's letter, and yes, it did contain a marriage proposal on your behalf, along with detailed plans for how we could all live together in a house with a swimming pool and a library that contains books in both Arabic and English. He's quite the negotiator. I think he gets that from his father. The photograph you sent made me cry happy tears for 20 minutes. He's grown so much. But his smile is exactly the same, pure joy mixed with mischief, like he's planning something wonderful that adults are too serious to appreciate. I've framed it and put it on my desk at work, where it makes me smile during difficult days. I have news that might interest you. The Plaza has partnered with several international medical organizations to provide cultural liaison services for families seeking treatment in New York. We're creating a formal program that would coordinate housing, translation, and emotional support for international patients. The director asked me to head the initiative, which would involve working closely with hospitals and establishing relationships with medical facilities in other countries. I said yes, obviously, partly because it's meaningful work that helps families like ours, but mostly because it feels like preparation for a future I'm still afraid to hope for completely. I've been thinking about what you wrote regarding possibilities that transcend convenient logic. Maybe the universe really did bring us together for reasons that have nothing to do with coincidence. Maybe some love stories are supposed to challenge geography, cultural expectations, and practical limitations. Maybe the obstacles are just opportunities in disguise. I've started learning Emirati dialect specifically, beyond the Egyptian Arabic I knew from Dubai. I want to understand every nuance of your world, every cultural reference that shapes Zayan's childhood. My Columbia professor says my pronunciation has improved dramatically. Apparently, love is an excellent motivator for linguistic precision. Tell me more about these international medical charities you're working with. Tell me if they ever need partnerships with American organizations. Tell me if you're thinking what I'm hoping you're thinking. Uhibak Akhtar min kol shay. I love you more than everything. Counting stars until dawn. Oprah. Fall arrived with letters that made both their hearts race with dangerous possibility. My dearest Oprah. I have established a new foundation, the International Family Medical Alliance. Our mission is to provide translation services, cultural mediation, and logistical support for families seeking medical care outside their home countries. I have received approval to open offices in several American cities, including New York. I tell myself this is purely professional, a natural expansion of meaningful work, but I would be lying if I claimed the choice of New York was made for business reasons alone. The custody situation has stabilized completely. Amina's attempts to paint me as an unfit father have backfired spectacularly. Most people view her behavior during Zayan's illness as unforgivable. She has remarried Rashid and moved to London, showing little interest in exercising her visitation rights. Zayan has stopped asking about her entirely. What he has not stopped asking about is when he can see his American mama again. His English is now fluent, his Arabic remains perfect, and he has added French to his linguistic repertoire because he wants to be ready for anything when we travel. Last night, he asked me if love letters could be used as airplane tickets. When I asked what he meant, he said that if our letters could travel across oceans, maybe they could carry us across oceans too. 8-year-old logic is often more sophisticated than adult reasoning. I have been consulting with immigration lawyers about international marriage requirements. Hypothetically, of course, but the hypothetical research has revealed that love, while not easily quantified in legal documents, can indeed conquer geography with sufficient determination and proper paperwork. I am not asking you to wait for us, Habibti. I have no right to ask that after the choice I made to protect my son, but I am telling you that if the time ever comes when our worlds can align again, when love can exist without threatening the people we most want to protect, I will be ready to build that bridge. In the meantime, I remain yours across all oceans and obstacles. Building foundations in more ways than one. Tanoon. P.S. Zayan insists I tell you that he has learned to make American pancakes from a YouTube video and that his first attempt was almost as good as Mama Oprah would make. He's practicing for when you come home. The letter that had arrived just yesterday contained news that changed everything. Beloved Oprah. The New York office of the International Family Medical Alliance will open next month. I will be traveling there personally to oversee the launch and establish partnerships with major hospitals, including Mount Sinai. Zayan will be with me. He has specifically requested that we stay at the plaza because he wants to see the place where his American mama works. He's been practicing his English pronunciation by reading American news websites aloud, and his vocabulary now includes words like merger, acquisition, and permanent residency. Subtle, he is not. I have spent this entire year building professional justifications for personal choices, creating business reasons to justify matters of the heart. But the truth is simpler and more terrifying than corporate expansion plans. I cannot live another day without seeing your face. I don't know what will happen when we see each other again. I don't know if the love we shared can survive the reality of our different worlds, or if the year apart has given you perspective on how impossible we really are. But I know that my heart still speaks only one language, your name in every form and every tongue. We arrive on November 15th, room 5847, the Plaza Hotel, the same suite where our story began. Ana muntazir lukum, I am waiting for you. With all my love and all my hope, Tanoon. P.S. I am bringing something special for you, something that requires an answer that can only be given in person. Oprah read the letter again, her hands trembling with a mixture of hope and terror. In 3 weeks, they would be here. In 3 weeks, she would see Zayan's face again, hear Tanoon's voice, speaking Arabic in person rather than just in her dreams. In 3 weeks, she would discover whether some love stories were strong enough to survive the test of time, distance, and all the obstacles the world could place between two hearts that belonged together. The morning sun painted her apartment in shades of possibility, and for the first time in a year, Oprah allowed herself to believe completely in impossible things. From the mouths of babes, as you Americans say. Ana ashtagilak kol yom, I miss you every day. Tanoon. Spring brought letters filled with hope tempered by realism. Ya Habib Albi. I received Zayan's letter, and yes, it did contain a marriage proposal on your behalf, along with detailed plans for how we could all live together in a house with a swimming pool and a library that contains books in both Arabic and English. He's quite the negotiator. I think he gets that from his father. I have been thinking about what you wrote regarding the medical charity work. There are organizations here in New York that do similar coordination, helping American families navigate healthcare systems in other countries when they're traveling or living abroad. Perhaps someday our paths will cross professionally, even if personal circumstances keep us apart. The word someday has become my favorite and least favorite word in English. It contains so much hope and so much uncertainty. I love that you're building something meaningful from the ashes of what Rashid tried to destroy. You're creating bridges, just like Zayan wants to do when he grows up. Just like the three of us were learning to do together. Uhibak akta min kol shay, I love you more than everything. Oprah. Summer's letters carried news that made Oprah's hands shake as she read, "My dearest Oprah, I have established a new foundation, the International Family Medical Alliance. Our mission is to provide translation services, cultural mediation, and logistical support for families seeking medical care outside their home countries. I have received approval to open offices in several American cities, including New York. I tell myself this is purely professional, a natural expansion of meaningful work. But I would be lying if I claimed the choice of New York was made for business reasons alone. The custody situation has stabilized completely. Amina's attempts to paint me as an unfit father have backfired spectacularly. Most people view her behavior during Zayan's illness as unforgivable. She has remarried Rashid and moved to London, showing little interest in exercising her visitation rights. Zayan has stopped asking about her entirely. What he has not stopped asking about is when he can see his American mama again. His English is now fluent, his Arabic remains perfect, and he has added French to his linguistic repertoire because he wants to be ready for anything when we travel. I'm not asking you to wait for us, Habibti. I have no right to ask that after the choice I made to protect my son. But I am telling you that if the time ever comes when our worlds can align again, when love can exist without threatening the people we most want to protect, I will be ready to build that bridge. In the meantime, I remain yours across all oceans and obstacles. Tanoon. The letter that had arrived just yesterday contained news that changed everything. Beloved Oprah. The New York office of the International Family Medical Alliance will open next month. I will be traveling there personally to oversee the launch and establish partnerships with major hospitals, including Mount Sinai. Zayan will be with me. He has specifically requested that we stay at the plaza because he wants to see the place where his American mama works. I don't know what will happen when we see each other again. I don't know if the love we shared can survive the reality of our different worlds, or if the year apart has given you perspective on how impossible we really are. But I know that my heart still speaks only one language, your name, in every form and every tongue. We arrive on November 15th. Ana muntazir lukum, I am waiting for you. Tahnoon. Oprah read the letter again, her hands trembling with a mixture of hope and terror. In 3 weeks they would be here. In 3 weeks she would see Zayan's face again, hear Tanoon's voice speaking Arabic in person rather than just in her dreams. In 3 weeks she would discover whether some love stories were strong enough to survive the test of time, distance, and all the obstacles the world could place between two hearts that belonged together. Chapter 9. The Return. Sometimes the cruelest distance is not measured in miles or months, but in the careful space between two people who are afraid to hope again, afraid to reach across the gap their own choices have created. The autumn afternoon light filtering through the Plaza Hotel's presidential suite windows cast everything in shades of gold and memory, but for Oprah, standing in the same luxurious space where this impossible love story had begun 13 months ago, the beauty felt almost mocking. She had been summoned here for what was officially described as a cultural orientation meeting for the new International Family Medical Alliance, but her hands trembled as she reviewed the professional materials that felt like elaborate camouflage for the personal reunion they were all desperate for, yet terrified to acknowledge. Ms. Oprah! The voice that called her name was deeper now, touched by the growth of a year, but unmistakably Zayan's. She turned to see him standing in the suite's doorway, no longer the sick 8-year-old she remembered, but a healthy, confident 9-year-old whose English had become flawless, while his Arabic poetry skills had clearly flourished under his father's tutelage. He rushed across the marble floor to embrace her, and Oprah felt her careful professional composure crumble as she held this child who had somehow remained the center of her heart despite 13 months of separation. He was taller. His face had lost some of its baby roundness, but his smile was exactly as bright as she remembered. "I missed you so much," he whispered in Arabic against her shoulder. "Every single day I missed you." "And I missed you, ya Habib Albi," she replied, her voice thick with tears she'd promised herself she wouldn't shed. "My heart, I missed you too." Over Zayan's shoulder, she saw Tanoon emerge from the suite's bedroom, and the sight of him stole her breath entirely. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his tall frame and broad shoulders, but it was the careful control in his expression that struck her most. The same professional mask he'd worn during their correspondence, hiding emotions too complex for public display. "Ms. Delacroix," he said formally, extending his hand in greeting as if they were business colleagues meeting for the first time. "Thank you for agreeing to consult on our cultural protocols." Ms. Delacroix. The formal address hit her like ice water, so different from the Habibti and Yanor Aini of his letters that she wondered if she'd imagined their entire correspondence. This was Sheikh Tanoon al-Rashid, successful businessman and philanthropist, treating her exactly like any other professional consultant. "Of course," she managed, forcing her voice to remain steady as she shook his hand. The brief contact sent electricity through her entire nervous system, but his expression remained neutral, polite, utterly controlled. "Baba," Zayan said, looking between them with the confused expression of someone who'd expected a very different kind of reunion. "Why are you calling Oprah Ms. Delacroix? That's not how you write about her in your letters." The innocent observation created a moment of such profound awkwardness that Oprah actually felt sorry for Tanoon, whose careful composure flickered with embarrassment before reasserting itself. "This is a business meeting, Zayan," he said gently. "Professional titles are appropriate." But Zayan, who had inherited his father's intelligence along with his stubborn streak, was not satisfied with this explanation. "But in your letters you call her Zayan," Tanoon interrupted with quiet authority. "Why don't you show Ms. Delacroix the presentation materials while I handle some phone calls?" What followed was the most professionally awkward hour of Oprah's life. Every interaction between her and Tanoon was filtered through medical foundation protocols and cultural consultation frameworks. He addressed her by her title, spoke to her only when directly required for business purposes, and maintained the kind of careful distance typically reserved for strangers or potential legal liabilities. Meanwhile, Zayan seemed increasingly frustrated by the adult's bizarre behavior. He had clearly expected a joyful reunion followed by immediate wedding planning, and the formal distance between his father and the woman he'd spent a year calling his American mama was obviously bewildering. "Are you fighting?" he asked finally in Arabic during a lull in the medical protocol discussion. "Did something happen that made you angry at each other?" The direct question hung in the air like an accusation. Oprah glanced at Tanoon and saw something crack in his professional facade, a moment of vulnerability that revealed the man behind the businessman's mask. "We're not fighting, Habibi," she said carefully. "Sometimes adults have to be careful about complicated situations." "What's complicated about loving each other?" Zayan asked, with the devastating logic that only children possessed. "You love Baba. Baba loves you. I love both of you. Everything else is just grown-up nonsense." The words echoed his passionate defense of their relationship from 13 months ago, and Oprah felt her heart break all over again for this wise child who couldn't understand why the adults in his life insisted on making love more difficult than it needed to be. "Zayan," Tarnoon said quietly. Some things are more complicated than they appear. Like what? Zayan challenged, switching to English with the fluency that marked his year of growth. Like the fact that you write her letters every week, like the fact that you keep her picture in your office in Dubai, like the fact that you built an entire medical foundation so you'd have an excuse to come back to New York and see her. The accusations landed with devastating accuracy, stripping away every pretense of professional distance and revealing the personal motivations behind their carefully orchestrated reunion. Oprah looked at Tarnoon with shock. He'd kept her picture. He'd built the foundation to see her again. "Zayan," Tarnoon said, his voice carrying a warning tone that the boy completely ignored. "I heard you talking to Uncle Abdul Rahman on the phone." Zayan continued relentlessly. "You said the New York office didn't need to be established this year, but you wanted to come back while you still had the courage. You said you needed to know if she still loved us or if we'd just been imagining everything." The revelation hung in the luxurious air of the presidential suite like a confession extracted under torture. Tarnoon closed his eyes as if he could somehow undo his son's brutal honesty, while Oprah felt her world tilt on its axis. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. "Did you really build all of this just to come back?" Tarnoon was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with how much truth to reveal. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The medical alliance is legitimate," he said carefully. "It serves families who need exactly the kind of help we needed 13 months ago. But yes, the timing, the location, the specific focus on New York partnerships, all of that was designed to create a reason to see you again." "Why?" The question came out more desperate than she'd intended. "Why go to all that trouble and then treat me like a stranger when you got here?" "Because I was afraid," he admitted, his professional mask finally slipping entirely. "Afraid that 13 months of letters and dreams and impossible longing had created something that couldn't survive the reality of being in the same room together. Afraid that you'd moved on to a life that made more sense than loving us." The honesty in his voice undid something fundamental in Oprah's chest. For over a year, she'd wondered the same thing, whether their connection had been real or just a product of crisis and proximity, whether love could truly survive the test of time and distance and all the practical obstacles their different worlds presented. "I haven't moved on," she said quietly, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. "I've tried to convince myself that I should, that you were right to choose Zayan's stability over our happiness, but I can't seem to love anyone else when my heart still belongs to both of you." The confession created a charged silence in the room. Even Zayan seemed to sense that the adults were finally approaching the truth they'd been dancing around for over an hour. "Then why are we pretending to be strangers?" Tarnoon asked, moving closer to her for the first time since her arrival. "Why are we hiding behind professional protocols when what we really want to do is—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes said everything. What he wanted to do was hold her, kiss her, celebrate the miracle of being in the same room again after 13 months of impossible longing. "Because we're scared," Oprah replied honestly. "Scared that this might be all we get. A few days of pretending before you have to go back to your real life, and I have to go back to mine." "What if it doesn't have to be pretending?" Zayan asked, inserting himself into the conversation with the determination of someone who'd waited quite long enough for the adults to figure things out. "What if this time we could make it real?" The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed, beautiful and terrifying in its possibility. And for the first time in 13 months, Oprah allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some love stories were strong enough to survive anything. Chapter 10. Forever Begins. The most beautiful love stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin with it, when two souls finally stop running from destiny and start building the life their hearts have been dreaming of all along. The next morning brought unseasonably warm November weather to Central Park, and Zayan had declared it the perfect day for what he called family planning. Though his version of family planning involved elaborate schemes to get his father and Oprah alone together long enough to stop being scared and start being happy. His latest plot had brought all three of them to the park's Shakespeare Garden, where late-blooming roses defied the season and created an unexpectedly romantic backdrop for what was supposed to be a casual walk. "This is where Baba should propose," Zayan announced in English, stopping beside a bench overlooking the garden's central fountain. "It's beautiful, it's romantic, and there are flowers that smell like the ones in Dubai." Oprah couldn't help but laugh at his determination, even as her heart raced at the word propose. After yesterday's emotional revelation in the hotel suite, they'd spent the evening in careful conversation, rebuilding the connection that letters had maintained, but physical presence had made uncertain. But marriage, that still felt like a bridge too far to cross. "Zayan," Tanun said gently, "we've discussed this. Marriage is complicated when people come from different countries, different cultures. There are legal issues, visa requirements, social expectations." "Boring, grown-up problems," Zayan interrupted with characteristic directness. "Uncle Abdul Rahman said you already researched all the legal stuff months ago. He said you have papers ready and everything." Tanun's face went pale, then flushed with embarrassment at his son's latest revelation. "Zayan, you cannot keep listening to my private phone conversations." "Then you should stop having them where I can hear," Zayan replied logically. "Besides, I think it's good that you planned ahead. It shows you're serious about loving Oprah." The casual reference to planning ahead, to legal preparations made in anticipation of a proposal, made Oprah's pulse quicken with dangerous hope. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. "Have you really been researching marriage requirements?" Tanun ran a hand through his dark hair, looking like a man whose carefully laid plans had been systematically exposed by an overly observant 9-year-old. "I may have investigated the practical requirements for international marriage, hypothetically, in case the situation ever arose." "Hypothetically," Oprah repeated, unable to suppress a smile at his obvious discomfort. "Very hypothetically," he confirmed, but his eyes were warm with something that looked suspiciously like hope. "Well," she said, settling onto the bench beside the fountain, "since we're speaking hypothetically, what did your research discover?" "That it's complicated but not impossible," Tanun replied, sitting beside her while Zayan perched on the bench's arm like a referee overseeing peace negotiations. "American UAE marriage requirements, visa applications, cultural integration support systems, all of it exists for people willing to navigate the bureaucracy. And the business complications? The social expectations you were worried about? The business has stabilized completely. Rashid's betrayal actually helped in some ways. It clarified who our real allies are, and most of our clients were disgusted by his behavior. As for social expectations..." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "I've spent 13 months learning that some things matter more than other people's opinions." The admission was delivered with quiet conviction, and Oprah felt her last defenses against hope crumbling. This wasn't the desperate love of their original crisis, or the theoretical affection of long-distance letters. This was a mature man who'd had time to consider all the obstacles and chosen love anyway. "What about Zayan?" she asked, glancing at the boy who was watching their conversation with the intensity of someone whose entire future happiness depended on the outcome. "What about the concerns that a new marriage might confuse him or make him feel displaced?" "Are you kidding?" Zayan said immediately. "I've been waiting for you to be my real mama for over a year. I already know what I want to call you. I already know which room should be yours in our house in Dubai, and I already picked out what we should do for your first Mother's Day together." The matter-of-fact way he'd planned their future life together made both adults laugh, but it also revealed how completely he'd accepted Oprah as his mother figure. This wasn't a child being asked to adjust to a new family configuration. This was a child who'd been waiting impatiently for the adults to formalize the family that already existed in his heart. "There's something else," Tanun said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "The International Family Medical Alliance isn't just a professional project. It's my way of building a life that includes both our worlds. The New York office will need a permanent director, someone who understands both American medical systems and Middle Eastern family dynamics." The implication hung in the air between them. "Are you offering me a job?" Oprah asked. "I'm offering you a partnership," he replied. "Professional and personal, a chance to build something meaningful together while creating a life that honors both our backgrounds." "And if I said yes to the partnership, both partnerships, what would that look like practically?" Tanun reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Oprah's breath catch in her throat. "It would look like this," he said, dropping to one knee on the garden path with the kind of natural elegance that made the romantic gesture feel inevitable rather than dramatic. "Oprah Winfrey," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet morning air. "You saved my son's life when I couldn't make anyone understand that he was dying. You saved my life when I was drowning in loneliness and couldn't imagine how to be happy again. You taught us both that love doesn't recognize borders or languages or cultural differences. It simply recognizes itself in another heart." He opened the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away, a magnificent sapphire surrounded by diamonds, clearly chosen to honor both their backgrounds with stones that sparkled like stars over desert and sea. "I know this isn't how most proposals happen," he continued, his dark eyes bright with emotion. "Most men don't propose after a year of separation, or with their 9-year-old son serving as matchmaker, or in a public park where strangers can witness their most private moments." "I like strangers witnessing," Zayan interrupted cheerfully. "It makes it more official. Most men also don't have to propose across cultural boundaries or offer to restructure their entire lives around the possibility that a woman might say yes," Tanun continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But I'm not most men, and this isn't most love stories." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. "This is our love story, written in 2 languages and lived across 2 continents, born in crisis and sustained by hope. And if you'll have us, if you'll have me as your husband and Zayan as your son and Dubai as your second home, I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that some bridges are strong enough to span any distance." Tears were streaming down Oprah's face, but her voice was steady when she answered. "Yes," she said clearly enough for the small crowd of park visitors who'd gathered to witness the proposal. "Yes to all of it. In both languages, in every language we know, and several we haven't learned yet." As Tanun slipped the ring onto her finger, Zayan let out a whoop of joy that probably startled birds in 3 states. "Finally," he announced to the gathered onlookers. "They've been in love forever, but they kept making it complicated." The spontaneous applause from their impromptu audience felt like a blessing, a celebration of love that had survived every obstacle the world could place in its path. As Tanun stood and pulled Oprah into his arms, as she felt his lips against hers for the first time in over a year, she realized that some stories truly do have perfect endings, not because everything is easy, but because the people in them choose to write beautiful chapters together, one day at a time. "So," she said, when they finally broke apart, "when do we start planning our bilingual wedding?" "Tomorrow," Zayan said immediately. "I already have ideas about flowers and music and whether the ceremony should be in Arabic or English or both." "Both," Tanun and Oprah said simultaneously, then laughed at their instant agreement. "Both," Oprah repeated, looking at her new family, the man who'd taught her that love could transcend any obstacle, and the boy who'd shown her that families could be chosen as easily as born. Always both. That's what makes us beautiful. In the Shakespeare Garden of Central Park, with autumn roses blooming impossibly in November, and strangers still applauding their happiness, the Al-Rashid family began their forever together, in Arabic, in English, and in the universal language of love that needed no translation at all.